Picking up all the places that have, then head back, I guess you can make it
But
went hard.
Kelly, sorry to ease up, but Brian's just discovering I didn't get several emails from him either, so.
Well, for me and from
He's retiring
and.
now he's retired.
So I don't know if somebody's getting hung up.
Should we get going?
Yeah.
Maybe it's something larger. So I just wanted to, in case there's a larger issue, the emails, so. That's good.
Okay, good evening. I'm going to call the committee of the whole meeting for Tuesday, July 14th. Order, call and roll.
That's what I want.
Alderman Strelchuk?
Here.
Alderman Tolaco? Here. Alderman Meyer? Here. Alderman Meyer?
Dude.
I'm here.
Alderman Hancher?
Here.
Alderman Bach is absent. Alderman Parrish?
Here.
Alderman Brack?
Here.
Alderman Gephardt?
Here.
And Mayor Nervous.
Here. First up, approval of the meeting minutes from June 4th and June 9th.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments, corrections, questions?
I may have had one.
Okay.
1 second, I'm so sorry.
Uh-oh.
Is this for the finance workshop, the minutes?
Before. Minutes, yes. Before. Well, yeah, either of those.
Yes. So in the minutes, under alternative revenue sources, item A, lodging tax, there was a comment saying following discussion, there was a consensus amongst the committee to move forward on implementing a 6% lodging tax as recommended, and staff was directed to prepare the necessary documents, et cetera, which I agree with the second part. I would just say that there wasn't, my recollection was that we did not have consensus to move forward with that. It was more that we wanted kind of the final analysis and paperwork and, I don't know, the instruments to implement it so that we could then make a final decision, but that was not. And if we did make the decision and that's the rest of your consensus, I would say I would have been a no for that, and that just put me on the record for that in these minutes. But if everyone agrees that we didn't agree to move forward with that tax, then I think these minutes need to be corrected. Thank you.
I recall that we did approve to move forward, but that request naturally has some paperwork and some process to come back to be approved at a later date. So I think we may be saying the same thing.
Or perhaps it's the wording. It says there was consensus to move forward on implementing. So it just,
and the next step
we're
is
just
to
not
prepare
there.
the documents so we can vote on it and approve it at a later date.
And I would just say that that's exactly what we decided to do with the vehicle registration fee. The wording was what I'm actually looking for, which is following the discussion, which included concerns about public perceptions related to the potential implementation of the vehicle registration fee. It was agreed that staff would do some additional work to more clearly define how any such potential revenue derived from such a fee would be utilized from a budgeting and or capital improvement standpoint. So I just don't see why we're not taking that exact same approach under lodging tax, and I don't know if my memory is wrong or if the minutes are wrong.
Alderman Strelchuk.
Committee of the whole just recommends to the council so you have a chance to vote on it or whatever. I think that there was a consensus that we wanted to move forward with seeing it. I think it's saying it, but maybe not as clearly as you'd want to see it written. So if you have a text edit that keeps the flavor similar but not getting too prescriptive, make the motion. I can second that for you. Because I think we're saying the same thing.
I don't want to rewrite what actually happened. If that was the case, just reflect in these minutes that that wasn't my position and I'm a no, so.
But
if it literally says to move forward. So like anyone from the public could read this and say, we decided to move forward on the lodging tax.
So, Mayor, if
Yes.
I may, as the guilty party who was responsible for approving and making sure these minutes accurately reflected what was otherwise discussed over a 6.5-hour period, I might suggest changing the word implementing to considering.
Great.
Thank you.
everybody's okay with that, we can move to, or a member of the committee can make a motion to amend the minutes as suggested.
So moved, thank you.
Second. As promised.
And the next step in the process of consideration is,
I'm
so
sorry.
we're gonna consider it, and the next step in that process is, because there was a
Come
a
forward.
decent amount of analysis.
Staff will prepare the necessary documents, the enabling ordinance, the tourism, I'd have to go back and check my notes. But there's some requirements related to the establishment of a tourism board, but Kim has a list of the things that she needs to do in order for this to be formally considered by the council, and we would bring that back in connection with the budget.
Does that come right to us, or does that go to like F&P or public welfare first? Is a recommendation okay from the committee of the whole?
It could go to appropriations. It could really, it could go any number of
Actually,
avenues.
the timing this year would work out that appropriations could be the recommending body,
Yeah, fine. with that.
because we'll all be together anyway.
So we'll change the word implementing to considering.
Yeah, let's be voting.
But I don't want to complicate this, but my recollection is that there was support to go ahead and continue to move this forward.
That's my recollection. And there was more hesitation on the meal tax.
Yes.
They didn't have the same level of concern. But
The-
there's nothing wrong with
But
saying
the change
concern.
is what, yeah, now it's saying the same thing though. And it's saying the exact same thing. So in your mind, did we not decide to move forward? We decided in the lodging tax, but not the vehicle registration fee?
That
Because in my mind-
is
because in my mind, we had the
my
same approach.
recollection. That there was stronger support for the hotel tax than there was for the vehicle
I do
tax.
recall that, yeah.
And I just don't want that language to be on the same plane, because I don't believe that's the context of the discussions.
We could just vote on the change and then, like, I'm okay with it. It's not my opinion.
Well, we're gonna, naturally, both those items, if we were to get to the point of consideration, to the point of implementation, we always get the vote out of it at the end. We haven't committed to anything. Alderman Meyer.
So do we want to take that to Alderman Stroutschuk's point? Do we want to take this up a little earlier in one of the committees, so in case there is some issues, not have it at the approval at the appropriations? So we can approve that ahead of time? Or disapprove?
That's up to the council. If that's the direction you'd like to go, staff will.
Instead of waiting to appropriation?
You can take a swing at the pinata during F&P,
Yeah.
if the timing works out.
More than welcome to join, it's a lot
We
of fun.
don't know how the calendar's
Can't
gonna
do your
work out,
budget.
but if we want someone to take or a committee of the whole, we're choosing.
We can pretty much make anything work. So what would you like to see? It come before we get to appropriations?
Well, I'm just thinking in case there are some issues with that, before it just ends up being an
Yeah,
appropriation.
I think before,
You know?
because it's a funding source and it'll swing one way or the other on budget. And there's always pressure to try to keep the budget as balanced as possible and not really bring up large points that you want to change during the budget cycle. So if we can maybe get that, it's a big ask, next month at
It's gonna be
F&P.
tough.
Yeah, there's some hoops required with that one, with setting up the tourism board. Some requirements that are gonna take some time to implement.
Yeah, I don't need to see every detail on all that stuff. I think there needs to be a public meeting where this is discussed and vetted out, just so a lot more people can have the chance. So I guess I would say appropriate or committee of the whole might be good.
So,
We're discussing a citywide tax on two different areas. That was discussed at a country club, not on video. So I think this is important enough, and you need to know in advance what to include in your budget for next year. So how would you even know if the taxes weren't We didn't approve one or the other, so you kind of need to know where we're leaning. We haven't decided
I think you're gonna budget based off it not being in place.
for that.
I gotta tell you, I'm a little confused because I thought the purpose of the committee of the whole was to get a general consensus of this group so that staff wasn't spending a lot of their time, and there's a lot of action items that are related to bringing this to the table and moving it forward, so that staff didn't spend their time and get to the end of it and somehow the group changed their mind on it. Why wasn't this brought up if that was a case that you wanted another forum? Why wasn't this brought up at that time before staff is moving forward on spending the time thinking that they've got a consensus from the group?
I would just say, because I'm not perfect and I don't remember and think about every single thing on the spot. And now that I've had time to think about it more, wouldn't you feel comfortable if 2 different taxes were publicly discussed and properly noticed and people had a chance to weigh in? Or
Well, that meeting was properly noticed, it was open to the public,
Okay.
it
So,
was also recorded,
so why
not
don't
on
we,
camera, so there's nothing
so I'm at the
illegal
point where
about
I'm
that.
ready to withdraw my motion, just have my opinion reflected, unless anyone else wants to speak up, because I don't want to create any more distraction or delays for this meeting. So I made my position clear. If you guys are ready to go implement 2 different taxes and you feel like you've decided,
No, I think we're very close on one and we're a lot farther away on the other.
So what if we did committee of the whole on August 12th, like final info? I don't want to know. Okay. So
Even a straw poll or as close as you got.
We had what, the last meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not even on the agenda, so let's.
It is, because it's in
Refrain.
the minutes.
No,
We
we're
just
talking
have to-
about the minutes, we're not talking
Yeah.
about voting on
Yeah,
something
okay.
for approval again.
So rather than picking the date on the calendar, it would be helpful from staff's perspective to know whether the council would like to consider this in connection with the budget or before you consider the budget. That's really the direction I need. I will make it work from a calendaring perspective.
My opinion, because we're asking, going around the horn, I'm sure, is that it's not added in the budget, and I don't care when we consider it, I prefer to consider it before. But if we do consider it at budget, don't have it be reflected in the budget based on the assumption of the dollar amount. Have it be an option and an add-on, and then if we approve this, then we can continue with some other items that aren't emotionally tied to one direction or another. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just so you're not
that's fine.
hijack or holding hostage the whole budget over this decision on the one item.
Right.
As long as they can be bifurcated, yeah.
Okay. All right, Mayor, I think we're still waiting on a vote on the minutes.
And
Is there still a
And the
motion and a
amendment.
second to,
There was an approval in a second, and we have amendments, we gotta vote on.
I mean, if we wanna change it to considering, that's fine, let's functionally change what we're gonna go do.
who's the second on the original motion?
I will,
Do you wanna accept the second and then we'll just vote it in one motion?
I'll accept it as a happy amendment.
So will I, so we can just, as amended based on what Will said.
Okay. Any further comments on the minutes? So we have a motion and a second
Yep.
on the minutes as amended, changing
Thank you.
implement to consider. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right. We move on with one objection. That gets us to introduction. That took longer than expected, but that's okay. You gonna give the intro?
Unless you'd like to, Mayor.
Well, sure. Welcome to part 2 of our financial planning workshop. Take it away, Administrator Jones.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank you.
lead.
And thank you to members of the committee for being here a little early as we kick off a workshop-style committee of the whole meeting here in mid-July. Just as a refresh, we were together on June 4th of last month, and the bulk of the day's activity centered around these 5 main agenda topics. We reviewed financial policies. We got an update on TID 3. We had a longer range of discussions on city facilities and long-term capital planning. Mr. Raymer from Ellers and Associates, who's again with us tonight, walked us through the intricacies of long-term financial planning and what that would look like as we drive towards the formation and establishment of that document. And just as we were discussing a moment ago, we spent some time on alternative revenues. In terms of the financial policies, work that's been done, and I left an I out of that title header there, polices. We've got 2 proposed amendments on tonight's agenda for Policy Statement 9 and Policy Statement 10. Those were both approved by the Finance and Personnel Committee earlier this evening, so those will be on the 7:30 p.m. regular meeting agenda. Those were both discussed and endorsed by the broader committee at our meeting last month. You'll recall during our discussion about tax increment District 3, we had a recommended transfer of $350,000 in interest from the TID to a new pool funding account. Since that time, the pedestrian crossing signals have been installed, and Director Lundin, we're just waiting on the interconnection between the railroad and the...
They're actually interconnected, we just need everything tested and then we can turn them on.
So we'll have a pedestrian crossing that actually works here in the next week or 2 or 3 as that work is completed. Director Tollefson is in the process of implementing the votes from the council regarding the summer banner package. We'll be swapping out the flag banners and putting up new midsummer banners in the town center here in the next week or so. And then, as we discussed, there may be some residual increment upon closure of the TID district available for capital or one-time projects. So just a reminder during our discussion about tax increment 3. There you can see on the right-hand side the new pedestrian crossing signals, the mastheads, if you will, that have been installed. In terms of city facilities, we awarded a contract to Williams Architects for design of phase 1 of the Mequon Commons Master Plan. Since that time, weekly meetings have been held regarding the design of the pool and the surrounding areas. Tonight we have also a resolution on the agenda for transferring the $700,000 surplus to the new pool account. That was also recommended by the Finance and Personnel Committee earlier this evening. And then we'll be coming to you in August with 3 potential options for a pool design at the Committee of the Whole meeting on Wednesday, August 12th. The fire chief, since the June 4th workshop, has put together a draft RFP that Director Lundin and I are both currently reviewing, and we agreed to continue discussion on the public safety building and where the council and the city are going to go on that at the meeting on June 4th. And then lastly, we are going to be putting together, as we just discussed, the enabling documents to support a 6% lodging tax, and those will be prepared now prior to consideration of the 2027 budget and the vehicle registration fee. No further action is pending at this point, and staff is going to put together some additional information as we walk through longer range capital planning going forward. So that's just a recap, and then here is tonight's agenda. We're going to talk water utility funding, sewer utility funding, utility financial policies, a little bit more on fund balance and impact fees, and then if there are any discussion points on the Committee of the Whole calendar, certainly we have time for that. To my left is Brian Raymer from Ellers. He is going to walk us through the utility funding and the sewer utility funding portions of tonight's discussion. Director Lundin, to my very far left, will walk us through the changes to the financial policies, and then time permitting, we'll get into fund balance and impact fees as we move through the latter portion of the meeting. So with that, I am going to click out of this and turn the cursor over to Mr. Raymer, and he is going to pick us up.
While he's doing that, do you guys want hard copies at all? I brought some.
If you already killed the trees, you may as well pass them on.
Yeah.
Here, I can
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
And we are gonna start with water. And the reason we're starting with water is 2 years ago, during our strategic planning workshop, we engaged in a discussion with Brian and Phil Cosson at the time about a recommended approach for funding the sewer utility. And we followed that over the last 2 years since approving those changes. And as the council will recall, we have been in a position where we're now able, or we're now able to self-fund the construction of Lift Station E without any borrowing. And previous projections had indicated that we would need to borrow money for that project. So Brian's gonna touch on that, but we wanted to spend the lion's share of tonight's meeting talking about the water utility and some of the factors that the council and the Water Utility Commission should be considering as we put the final touches on this long-range financial plan, which will include a component of both the sewer utility and the water utility. So, unless there are any questions, I'm gonna turn it over to our resident expert here, and Brian's gonna walk us through the water and the sewer portion of tonight's meeting. Brian?
Thank you, Will. Thank you all for having me here tonight. So, as Will mentioned, we're gonna talk about the utilities. If you don't recall from 2 years ago, generally, right, our task when we're evaluating utilities is fiscal sustainability. What do we mean by that? We want each utility to stand on its own 2 feet. Not every water payer is a sewer payer, right? Generally, that's the thought. The other thing is maybe not every taxpayer is a sewer payer. Not every taxpayer is a water payer. These are isolated enterprise funds in your audited financials for a reason, right? They're an enterprise fund, each of their own, to say, we produce our own revenues for the service that we provide. In providing that service, right, that's 365 days a year, 24/7, safe drinking water and disposal of that water if it's the sewer utility. And 2 of the main financial metrics that we rely on is debt coverage and reserves. And the ability to provide that service as frequently as you need to, and the importance of it, yields itself to be a business that operates that's very capital intensive, meaning it costs a lot of money to put those assets in the ground or in the air, as well as it costs a lot of money, or I should say, maybe a little more volatility in the maintenance accounts than you may experience in some of your governmental funds, right? We live in a lovely climate that produces hot days like today, but also very cold days where you can have main breaks, pump breaks, and other things breaking. So with that, the volatility in maintenance expenses, debt coverage becomes very important. So what is that? That's, you want net revenue available for every dollar of debt service. Essentially, $1.60 for every dollar of debt service is what's the goal. If you read through the methodologies of Moody's and S&P in terms of speaking to the credit worthiness of utilities, this is their highest weighted criteria when they're evaluating the financial health of utilities. So net revenues, just think of that as cash revenues against cash expenditures, so we're not including depreciation. But cash revenues against cash expenditures, whatever's left over, that's called net revenues available for debt, and then you're taking the ratio of that to debt, and you want that to be 1.6. Obviously, with a minimum of 1, if you're below that, right, you're relying on reserves to pay your debt, which is not a good place to be. Reserves, the second highest weighted criteria, and sometimes on equal playing field with the rating agencies' methodologies. We generally want that to be, I'll kind of go through all of the different ranges when I get to this further on, but 6 months of operating expenditures plus 100% of next year's debt payment. So there's some nuance to that, which I'll kind of explore more in depth as we go on. Our process in evaluating this, we'll look at historical rate and financial performance. A lot of, though, tonight in terms of the water side is going to be some Public Service Commission education. The PSC operates as its own different animal. If you didn't know, we are rated as kind of the most risky in terms of the ability to raise revenues in the United States because of how stringent our Public Service Commission is, allowing utilities to adjust rates. Not only that, they take an incredible amount of time to adjust rates. It can take up to 9 months, sometimes a year and a half to get through what's called a rate case, which is essentially getting a rate adjustment. So again, very important to know how the PSC operates. We'll go through some future projections to identify where the utilities are going, any rate impacts, therefore forthcoming, and then as well as we have some of that homework that Will mentioned in our agenda tonight from last workshop meeting, revisiting the general fund reserve policy and impact fees. Jumping into the water utility and right into some riveting PSC talk, you do have technically 3 opportunities to adjust rates. The first one is called a simplified rate case. You can only do once a year and only if you're eligible. There are multiple eligibility criteria. The first and most important, you have so many customers in your system that the PSC has classified you as an AB utility. I would not pat yourselves on the back about that because that provides you one less opportunity compared to other utilities in using the simplified rate case. Class AB utilities can only complete simplified rate cases within 5 years of their last conventional rate case. So that means that valve is shut off, pun intended, once you've eclipsed 5 years of implementation of your last full rate case. If you're curious on that, we'll get that down below. December 27th of 2013 was your last full rate case. So yes, we have eclipsed 5 years. You are no longer allowed to do a simplified rate case until you've completed your next conventional. There are other criteria that you have to meet in order to do a simplified. Essentially, that's you have to be at a rate of return that if you did the simplified, it wouldn't take you over their benchmark rate of return. I'll explain what that benchmark rate of return nonsense is in a second. But just note, there's other eligibility criteria within that 5-year window. It's not just automatic that we can do 4 of these after we implement. And so that should just be kind of the note with that 4th bullet point in the simplified rate case. The last SRC is just kind of publicly unknown as the, to me, as the outside observer, because the PSC website records only started in 2009, so likely it was sometime before that, and again, really not important. The conventional rate case, you are eligible whenever, meaning you can do this at any point in time. Generally, communities only would do it once a year if they do accomplish this task. The PSC, though, will want their math. I'll go into great detail about that on the next slide. The other one is you are eligible for a purchased water adjustment, which means if any of your water suppliers adjust their rates to you, you can do a purchased water adjustment only for that cost. So it's called a pass-through rate adjustment, right? You can just adjust your rate to meet that new cost. And you did complete one of these more recently in 2023 when Milwaukee Water Works adjusted their rates. I'll kind of get into some nuance there as we talked with staff and wanted to kind of dive deeper into the purchased water adjustment. So rate revenue determination, this is getting into the PSC math. So generally in the United States, answering the question, how much revenue should we generate from user rates? There is the American Water Works Association put out the M1 manual, which is a nice 200-page textbook for light reading that can kind of derive how utility rates are born in answering this question. They call it a revenue requirement, and there are 2 methodologies. The first one is called the cash basis. The second one is called the utility basis. It should be known, since we live in Wisconsin and have this lovely PSC organization, we are subjected to the right-hand side and the right-hand side only. However, as I walk through the cash basis, hopefully you can understand and appreciate our efforts to always evaluate utilities on both. One, because debt service is not included in the PSC's evaluation. So, cash basis on the left, I liken that to a personal budget. You have your day-to-day expenses, gas and groceries for a utility that's operating and maintenance expenses, taxes and transfers. Personal budget, right? You got a mortgage payment on the house, maybe a car payment for a utility, debt service, if you finance assets. And then the last one's a little more nuanced. It's all to say we just don't want zero cash flow after we pay our day-to-day expenses and our debt service. So They've labeled that capital funded from rates or cash funded capital. I would just mention there, generally that's where we're kind of calculating that debt coverage, right? It's the same principle. We want excess cash flow beyond our debt payment and our day-to-day expenses. The other thing that protects against is, right, that volatility that I talked about in your maintenance expenditures. But add all those cost buckets up, subtract out non-rate revenues. Those are things like forfeited discounts. If you have like water tower, cell tower rents, you know, things like that, any non-rate revenue from the utility, you'd subtract those out and that builds your revenue requirement. PSC, same day-to-day expenses, then they want you to recover depreciation. But what we haven't factored in yet is depreciation is original install cost, right, divided by its service life. So to replace that asset, we're not factoring in inflation yet. The other thing is if you finance that asset, we're not factoring in the interest expense yet. So the rate of return is really designed to recover inflation and the interest expense there when you kind of read through the AWWA M1 manual. But that's the sole math that the PSC looks at to derive rates. And then obviously add all those cost buckets up, subtract out the non-rate revenues. Oh wait, there's a fun little caveat here. Interest rate revenue is not a non-rate revenue. It's actually not a revenue at all to the PSC. So don't invest your money, if you ask the people in Mass. That's just a small joke I make every time.
Can you elaborate on depreciation? Because we always talk about, are we charging the right amount? And that's really what, we always say like for reserves, but I guess that's what reserves is kind of depreciation in a way, isn't it?
Depreciation is designed to recover the replacement cost of an asset as like a simple mathematical like the simplest mathematical calculation, right? So just original install cost divided by its service life. So as long as you're recovering that, you're recovering the replacement at its original value. But I struggle to find the replacement of pipe from 1975 to 2026 that's at the same value, right? Same goes for pumps and other things at the utility. But that's what depreciation is designed for. Whether or not you're doing it correctly really relies with the auditor and their work papers in terms of what, you know, are they making those entries correctly, retiring assets at the correct value and things like that. And a lot of times you find maybe not arguments to be made, but at least questions to be asked because has record keeping been that great, you know, since the assets were originally installed and things like that? Like the pipe can last 30, 50 years sometimes, even greater. And so it's kind of the question of when it was originally installed, do we have like, you know, like the right exact, we replaced 100 feet here, do we have that exact install cost still on record? Maybe not. So whether or not you're accounting for it absolutely to the penny may not be a huge factor. It's just kind of the general premise. You want to be recovering depreciation plus more because the inflation factor.
Interesting.
Yep. So, evaluating the water utility historically on both methodologies, the left-hand side of the chalkboard is now on top, the right-hand side of the chalkboard is now on the bottom. These are the City of Mequon's water utility numbers applied to those two methodologies. So, a couple of things to note there. Again, while the PSC is not as concerned with this top half, I still am, as your fiduciary. Are we recovering, you know, our debt payments and, you know, just kind of general cash funded capital? The caveat that I'll note here is when we look at historical cash funded capital, there may be times that you're choosing to spend cash or reserves on a project, and therefore, right, it's highly escalated in that year, if that makes sense, right? You chose not to finance it. You made an educated decision to use cash on it, but therefore your cash funded capital amount goes very high. So don't take some of these large negative red numbers with negative connotation, if that makes sense. And I'll kind of point that out here. 2021, 1.6 million in cash funded capital, meaning you paid 1.6 million out of cash. If you were to look at like the 2021 statement of cash flows in your audit, acquisition of capital assets is the line that's essentially formulating this number. So you just chose to spend more cash. Some of that could have been, you know, proceeds that just kind of hung out until the next year as well. So again, try not to get hung up on the big negative numbers, because if I kind of take, you know, the average cash funded capital here, generally we are above our revenue requirement and in a pretty healthy manner, right? There's just a couple of years, right, where we have bigger capital spends out of reserves, and you do have a good reserve history. I'll speak to that in a second as well. In terms of the PSC math, more important, because right, we're subject to it. We talked about day-to-day expenses. I'll note that right now you do not have a pilot payment in the water utility, but just note that's where the cost bucket would be if it existed. But that's a day-to-day expense. Depreciation, and then this rate of return. So this is where I kind of want a little bit of this education to come from. The PSC benchmarks all utilities. Doesn't matter if you're Mequon, Milwaukee, Melvina, Manawa, Manitowoc, all the M's I can think of off the top of my head that I've been to personally. You're all subject to the same rate of return. Not all utilities are created equal, but you're all subject to the same rate of return. They benchmark the rate of return to be AAA 30-year yield plus 2%, or at least that's what they say. I find that interesting because in 2021, I was issuing non-rated debt at 1%. So technically the rate of return should have been 3%. But anyway, I digress. The PSC does set a floor, and they make up rules as they go. Hopefully you're noticing some of that. A little bit of spite on my end. I do about 20 rate cases a year and have a lot of fun battling them. But anyway, 4.9% was their benchmark. And then out of the COVID valley of interest rates for municipal issuers, the benchmark rate of return rose. This is more in line with where it's been typically. You know, historically, we generally see this between 5.5% and 7%. And we're kind of back to that norm, if you will. So what affects this cost bucket, though? The cost bucket is down here. Your net investment rate base. What that is just think of that as the undepreciated value of your system. Or as you add capital, right, this number's gonna go up. Generally because you're adding it due to inflation faster than you're depreciating and retiring it, if that makes sense. So you can kind of see that trend here, although I'll say, right, generally flat, but now we do have some bigger projects, you know, that were in the 26 budget, that if fully completed by year end, right, you would have now a higher rate base, and therefore, you know, the benchmark rate of return really not moving that much, a higher cost bucket in this. But again, I want you to understand that as you do more projects, this math is compounding, right? You're generally not retiring it as an equal amount to what you're adding, again, due to inflation. So that's very important. The other thing that I'll mention is you have a big subtractor that is removed. Some good investment earnings, 23 through 25. I still don't know how you had negative interest income, but that's not for tonight's discussion. But that's removed, you know, from the PSC's math, which is also a significant factor when you think about the city of Mequon's water utility, right? You would technically be $300,000 more rate adequate in the PSC's math. So just kind of note that, but the good news is you're currently 180,000 above rate adequacy. You know, with your 2025 PSC annual report, you would see you're above their benchmark rate of return. At that time, off the top of my head, I don't remember what that was, but you were well above it, being 600,000 rate adequate. So to speak to some of those decisions to use cash to finance capital, both in 21 and 25, which were the two, or excuse me, leading up, 25 leading up to 26, where you had those larger cash funded capital items, you were above the benchmark that we would recommend, and that's generally 6 months of operating and maintenance expenses and next year's debt. I'm gonna talk about that relative to the rating agencies on its own slide, on how we kind of came up with that target, but I'll just kind of mention here, you know, the utility is producing cash. And that should make sense when you see your rate adequate, you know, by $500,000 on average through the, you know, 5-year history there. And then if this mythical beast called rate of return didn't exist, like, are we recovering our depreciation? Well, that answer is obviously yes, because we were recovering the rate of return on top of depreciation. But this is kind of an indicator that if we see utilities aren't even recovering depreciation, it's kind of like, even if the PSC set the rate of return at 0, you know, you're not recovering their cost buckets, and that could be like the Germantown 86% rate adjustment, right, that they saw a couple of years ago. So that's kind of the point, is these are some things you want to pay attention to and forecast. So we'll kind of get into the forecast there. We have your capital plan from the CIP for 26 through 30. I just want you all to know that, you know, talking with staff, our model's set up for 10 years, so I said, why not just throw in some additional cash-funded capital? So that's what CFC means. I'm not creating my own fighting club or anything like that. That's just cash-funded capital, 31 through 35. So what you're looking at there is the ability for the utility, based off of its reserve target, to be able to cash fund all of that. I will say, in discussing with staff too, I think this connection loop is kind of maybe, or, you know, might be over a couple years, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, right now that was in the capital plan, but it may kind of divvy out over time as well in terms of expectations going into the future. But that said, even if you did it all this year, or there wasn't another revenue source that's gonna pay for it, the utility could afford it. So that should be good news. So, any questions to this? Otherwise, this is gonna be the most important slide. Okay. This is the most important slide. How does my PSC project, you know, how does the city's PSC projected math look? So what we're doing here is kind of freezing the rate of return, the PSC's benchmark rate of return, knowing that this is generally the norm, adding that capital plan in, right, projecting out retirements. Generally, we kind of do that at like 30% of value to 35% of value, so understand there's some assumptions baked in here. But generally, assets for utilities are added faster than they're depreciated and retired, so the PSC math grows. So slowly, we will not be rate adequate for the PSC math. And then, right, it's kind of we can't do the simplified rate adjustments, which I did not mention earlier. Those are generally 3%. So the PSC says the simplified rate adjustment, no matter what utility you are, if you're eligible, is an allowed 3% revenue adjustment. You can see here there's some years that rate jumps just about 3%, so it'd be nice if you could do simplifieds to kind of be on even keel or level that PSC math. My point would be to all utilities is to continually monitor this and try to do something before we get into a rate shock scenario, right? Knowing that you only have so many levers you can pull, you choose when, you don't choose the magnitude. That's the biggest takeaway that I want anybody to understand from the water utility is you choose when, you don't choose the magnitude. You can choose the magnitude by choosing when. And so therefore, if you kind of wanted to set a rate policy that we'd rather not do a rate case that would yield something greater than a 10%, you would say we're looking at our next rate case to be for 2030 at a 7% rate adjustment. So then, once you implement that, you could do a simplified rate case within the 5-year window after that point. The other thing I'll mention, anytime you're allowed to do the purchase water adjustment, do it, right? It's a pass-through rate. It's easy to blame the other people, of course. You know, it just kind of makes sense. We have this cost going up due to their rate case. We now want to pass that rate adjustment on in order to keep up with our costs. Otherwise, right, once you do a CRC and not do simplifieds, or if you choose to not do, you know, purchase water, it's compounding on itself, right? And again, that compounding will go even higher on this because I'm not projecting out Milwaukee's rate cases. what does it look like if you were to do some of this? And right now, what I actually did was a 29 rate case for 4.6%. You'll see it being implemented in 2030, because I did mention before, this can take 6 to 8 months to implement. It's a lovely process. You would go for somebody using 12,000 gallons per quarter. This only affects the water bill. This does not affect the sewer bill. From your fixed costs currently of $61.47 and your volume cost of $5.29 per 1,000 gallons. So if this is somebody using 12,000 gallons per quarter, which is a little bit higher than your general average residential bill, but probably a good metric for a family of 4. It's about a $5 change or almost $6 change to that quarterly bill. So I would feel that's rather reasonable, right, than some others that we, have seen across the state. Generally, the average PSC rate adjustment right now is 45%. A lot of people get behind this math quicker than they imagine. So again, this is the most important slide. You probably want to keep forecasting this. And then I do show simplifieds. That's only to just show the impact. I'll kind of show what I'm kind of recommending, if you will, in a second, but just kind of what the simplifieds would be if you chose to use them within that window. So do nothing approach. The thing I like about this, you can afford it. So you stay within generally, our all-in debt coverage desires, right? We said anywhere between 1.6 and 1. The goal is 1.6, that would be ideal. I understand the hesitation to always adjust rates automatically to get to something like that, specifically because you have debt dropping off soon. So the debt coverage ratio won't matter as much. The other thing, based off of our recommended reserves, that's 6 months O&M plus next year's debt payment. You stay healthy within that throughout the whole time period. I would just say, right, the only kind of risk here is years 6 through 10. If there's any other large projects looming, right, that may change our opinion on the matter. The point would be, though, is I would still consider doing that rate case in the effort to mitigate the magnitude of your adjustment, knowing that you don't control the magnitude of the adjustment. One of the benefits of doing so as well, obviously we stay fiscally healthy, but also we don't jump any utilities if we do that still, that 4% adjustment, 4.62. This is a chart organized by water bill for Milwaukee and Ozaukee County by 12,000 gallons per quarter. This is publicly available on the PSC's website. I have just added a row for what those new rates would look like. And you don't jump anybody, you kind of stay right where you're at there. It is all to say too, if you look at this effective date, there may be other communities that would be tackling rate cases from now until then as well. So in terms of those reserve policies, how did we get there? Generally, based off of the utility size, 6 months O&M, and next year's debt payment, we feel would kind of put you in line where we want to be with Moody's and where they kind of see the utilities going. And this is kind of from their whole utility sector there. So they're just kind of noting that in general, utility reserves have been growing slightly and then actually coming back down. The one point I would just make there, if you're wondering why sewer is a little higher than water, the state revolving fund loan programs, your DNR loans in all states, not just Wisconsin, generally require what's called an equipment reserve fund. So generally you'll see kind of mandated higher reserves for sewer utilities. And that's just because the disposition between how many treatment plants there are per sewer utility as compared to water treatment plants per utility. But anyway, the other thing from S&P, a little more important for you all, as you are rated by S&P, they would generally say the highest assessment grade you can get for days cash on hand is greater than 150 days cash on hand. So if you have 6 months plus 100% of next year's debt, you're going to be greater than 150 days cash on hand. So that would be getting you to where you want to be there, in line with the sector, kind of qualitative data and quantitative data that Moody's is kind enough to provide a little more than S&P does. So, let me just state one more thing. With staff, we've been talking about is this undesignated only reserves or designated and undesignated reserves. So when you have revenue bonds, you'll have covenants within those revenue bonds to keep a debt service reserve. You can look at this two ways. I would generally say it's probably safest to isolate the two, meaning our policy is we're going to keep reserves to our bond covenants plus this, our six months O&M, and just FYI, I think I said it earlier, but operating and maintenance expenses includes depreciation. And then next year's debt would be our kind of undesignated, or maybe just call it general reserve target plus whatever our bond covenants require, right? And that makes logical sense to me. Some communities will say our reserve requirement is so minimal, right? This kind of covers it as well. So two schools of thought. I would just say generally, if you say, hey, we're going to cover our bond covenants no matter what, and then this will actually be our reserve policy, I think you're checking all the boxes that you should be there. So just some thoughts. In terms of water considerations, your policies for the water utility talk about, not doing an adjustment that would put you above the PSC math. The PSC math won't allow you to do that anyway, so while that's logical to conclude, I would say you could kind of update that if you wanted to. I do have communities that will make a rate policy to say we're going to continually evaluate this, and our goal would be to not do a rate case that yields something higher than X. That doesn't have to be in written policy. It can be more of like a utility goal as well. But just so you know, I've had some communities after showing them this, like West Dallas and others, that have set 15%. They just don't want the PSC math to get so far behind that it's greater than 15%. So that's kind of their unwritten goal in that example. So I just kind of point that out. If you want to augment your rate policy, I kind of simplified it to just say don't get behind the PSC math and set a target. You can have a discussion on that. The purchase water adjustments, a question set forth from your staff to us, given our experience with the Public Service Commission, was can we do it when North Shore Water Commission, if I have that correctly said, when they adjust their rates? It was a little kind of hard to discern initially how it's written in your tariff, because it says after a conventional rate case. Well, they're not regulated by the PSC, so they will never have a conventional rate case. So it's kind of like you really can't do one. When I spoke to PSC, they said that's just kind of implied nomenclature to say you can do one after any of them adjust the rates, whether it's a conventional rate case or not, which I found also hilarious, because they won't let you do one if Milwaukee Water does a simplified rate case. So again, we see the scales of justice constantly changing over there. But anyway, I would just say the question from staff posed to us is, could we do one if North Shore adjusts their rates? My answer after my investigation with my colleagues at the PSC is yes. And again, my recommendation to do as such would be yes. Anytime a water supplier adjusts the rates, it makes sense to do that pass-through rate adjustment. It's generally not a very large adjustment, and the work to complete it is not very large as well. It's a rather simple spreadsheet in my mind in terms of calculating that and submitting it to the PSC. Another question posed to us is kind of, could we have a pilot? It is allowable. You're allowed to treat the utility kind of like a taxpayer. up to the mathematical result of your current mill rate times the assessed value of your plant and service. Well, there is no fair market value of your plant and service, so it's just really think about it as your plant and service, and then it's only plant and service in the municipal boundaries. So they call it your assessed value, but just think of that as your utility plant and service within municipal boundaries. It would both increase the expenses of the water utility, but also increase the revenue of the general fund. So again, this is like treating the water utility like a taxpayer, and you would essentially say, hey, we have a new pilot expense, but the general fund is the one that collects it. And then just note the max amount is regulated by the PSC of what that pilot could be. The yes, no, or the amount below that is not regulated by the PSC. What do I mean by that? At any meeting, you could adopt a resolution for whatever value below the maximum amount down to 0, and the PSC has to accept it. So this is one of the items that is fully in control of the city and not the Public Service Commission. So. Any questions on water?
So with your last point, you had that slide showing the municipalities in Milwaukee and document.
Yeah.
Well, how many of those did that pilot set up that you just mentioned?
Oh, that's a great question. I can get that information.
You can get that information.
Yeah, I don't have that off the top of my head. The last time the PSC looked at it, it was a pretty low ratio. I want to say it was like under 15% have 0 pilot. There is a decent amount though that do less than the maximum, right? A lot of the reason for that is since it isn't controlled by the PSC, that's one of the rate games you can play with them.
Right.
As you're going into a rate case, you can say, we want to, cut our pilot expense in half so that our rate case isn't 80%, it's 40%, right?
So I hear allows for a lot of flexibility if you're playing in the
Yep.
Yeah, if you can get, I'd just be curious for that.
Yep. Yeah, that'll be easy enough.
Okay.
Any other questions on the water?
Well, once, twice. Going right down the drain into the sewer.
There we go. I like it. Let's take a whack at the piñata, as he said earlier. So sewer, we're gonna do this a little quicker because we've already talked about it 2 years ago. And the other thing is we don't have the PSC to deal with, so we are looking at this solely on the cash basis. I would just say, as Will mentioned in the preamble here, is we did make the decision to cash fund the East Lift Station there, so your cash funded capital looks quite high. It makes it look rate inadequate there. But if we kind of remove that, out of the equation, we look much better there. So the rate adjustment, isn't 127%. We would say kind of more in line with those inflationary adjustments that we have been talking about historically. The utility is doing well with the reserves target. That again, same reserves target as the water utility. The interesting thing here is your operating ratio, including depreciation, is much lower. So you just have higher depreciation within the sewer utility. That's probably just a function of assets and the amount of assets there as well. The thing that I would point out though is still producing cash is a healthy place to be there. So, and again, we don't have our friends at the PSC to deal with in terms of rate making. In terms of the capital plan there, the list is a lot longer than water. So that I didn't have slide room to show, but I would just say in terms of the line items necessary. But continuing on with the discussion from what we presented 2 years ago, this can be all cash funded out of 2 buckets. You have your equipment replacement fund designated projects, and then your other reserve account designated projects that I've just kind of generalized as cash there as well. And again, the lift station is kind of the big one out there for 26. So in terms of the sewer rate projection to kind of keep us on task with the plans that we've laid out like 2 years ago, I would generally recommend doing something every other year at minimum. You're certainly welcome to do something every year as well. You kind of have full latitude without the Public Service Commission here. To keep the message simple, one of the reasons is baked into our other revenues was the levy that you historically would increase, and now we've decided, since that eats into our net new construction allowable levy, to keep flat, which we now are doing, right? The rate revenues need to pick up the tab. So that said, to kind of keep in line with you know, the healthy position that we're in, we do feel with the operating expenses, which we've assumed 3% annual inflation, it would make sense to kind of adjust those rates biannually. The only other consideration there in terms of, you know, do we do it biannually or annually, is just kind of thinking about maybe some other fees adjustments that you're doing. Again, the main message is just note rates have to pick up the bill a little bit more with the levy remaining flat. So we just recommend, you know, kind of continuous evaluation of this. You do have kind of a rate policy that'll set this afoot anyway, to kind of continually take this on as you're developing your budgets year over year. Okay. What does the 3% kind of look like? Again, this is 12,000 gallons per quarter. You get your fixed charge and your volume charge, and the 3% there. I understand your actual rate book that you do this in may change these variably and not just on a flat basis. So I follow the rate book when it gets to time to budget season, but just to get to impact, you know, the 3% are generally about a $6 increase per quarter, which is very manageable here as well. I don't know why that says 220. That makes, sorry about that. I will make that makes 0 sense. I'm guessing it's pulling a change from like a 0, so apologize for that. So the utilities kind of done now, but generally to hit the recommendations again. Maintain, you know, you're projected to maintain the fiscal sustainability metrics without the rate adjustments. However, the PSC cares nothing about your fiscal sustainability metrics. They care about their math. Imperative to stay ahead of their math and avoid larger magnitude adjustments. So try to, you know, kind of figure out what the, you know, latitude for your allowable rate adjustment would be there, kind of maybe pick a rate target. For the sewer utility, you know, you maintain that sustainability with smaller but more frequent adjustments. Again, the tax levy's frozen. You know, if you decide, you know, there is a good portion of water and sewer payers or, you know, other fees going up, right? You have the freedom to kind of adjust the years that you do it as well, just because it's unregulated there. So if you wanted to kind of change the cadence, you know, that's, and maybe attack a future year a little bit higher than 3%, whatever it is, just know you have the latitude to do it. Anything on the utilities?
Anyone?
Nope. Okay.
All right, we're good.
So then going to some of our homework, this will definitely be quicker than the utilities. Oh, sure, sorry, I forgot the agenda.
I
Yep,
think I
you
have
guys
a slight interruption.
go for it.
So, based on Brian's presentation and some of the discussions with staff, we've included draft policy language that we wanted you to be able to review and react to based on some of Ayler's recommendations that, given any feedback tonight, would be before you formally in August for adoption, should you so decide that that is appropriate. So as noted, both the water and sewer utility already have reserve policies. However, they are not calculated based on the Ayler's recommendation, so we are proposing language that would conform to what the recommendation is, which is that basis for the 6 months of expenditures plus next year's debt payment. I have already made some notes on the water, which I think is the first one. Nope, sorry, sewer is the first one that we are discussing. So in August, we will also include the values of what the current and projected reserve amounts would be, so you understand what the impact of the policy amendments would otherwise be. And somewhat late breaking is I may have been incorrect that sewer may fall short, so I will also include some language in terms of how we would pursue that reserve requirement, because it would either eliminate all cap funding until we met that reserve requirement, which I hope you would not otherwise support, or some other logistics. So we'll look through that language, but I wanted to at least understand if you were generally accepting of Ayler's recommendations to change how just in this conversation, the sewer reserve policy is calculated, being that basis of the 6 months of operating expenditures and next year's debt payment.
I would be in favor of that.
See no general discussion, so that will be before you next month for formal consideration.
Water's got it in the bag already. Sewer might have some work.
Correct. Yes. And the only thing I noted based here, I think both for staff's sake, for future water utility commission sakes, and maybe just for resolution ourselves, I think we'll add some additional language in the water reserve policy regarding the bond covenant, just so that we're all straight on how that will be calculated and whether it's duplicated or exclusive. So looking simply for the same on the water reserve requirements for the change in calculation to the 50% of operating with next year's debt payment. So they would mirror each other. We'll just add some of that clarifying language that Brian mentioned. And if so, I don't need
Sounds good.
I was gonna say, I don't need to draw that out any longer than needed. And so the last consideration based on Ayler's recommendations is the introduction of a water funding policy. As noted, the sewer utility created one several years ago that is the basis under which we budget. The good news for staff is this policy mostly just memorializes what we're already doing. It's just a more formalized approach to examine some of those triggers or other things that we're projected to look at. I did note, if you're otherwise mostly okay with the language as proposed, that I think we will add the requirement to utilize the math included in the most important slide that was reiterated several times. You may recall on the sewer side, because we don't meet some of the policy requirements, we're doing a 10-year projection. Somewhat similar on the water side. We should certainly be looking at that projection so that we're not only looking at the singular fiscal year basis, that we are looking further out so that we can both check that PSC math and anticipate when we may be eligible for a rate case. The majority of the rest of what Brian spoke to is otherwise incorporated into this language. We already have the language in there that indicates when a purchase water adjustment is available that we would use it. That was indiscriminate based on Milwaukee Water Works or North Shore Water Commission. So thankfully, with clarification, that would not result in any changes to the policy language. And I did note that we will probably add some additional language for your consideration in terms of whether we want to include a threshold under which we would be looking at that PSC rate adjustment. The good news is it's our policy, so if you ever decided to change it or not follow it, you could. So since we're good for the next several years, it's non-binding. It would just maybe give us as staff the framework when we're presenting budget information to you in terms of how close we're getting to what you've determined might be that trigger of when that rate case would come forward. Otherwise, with those modifications noted, the final version would again be before you next month for consideration.
Alderman Gilbert.
So Kristen, just so I understand it, in terms of any pass-throughs, we've already got that in our policy that those pass-throughs will be passed on?
Yes, we perhaps at staff level, we haven't been implementing the purchase water adjustments for North Shore because of them not being regulated by the PSC, and therefore our assumption that they were not eligible. Now that we understand that we were, happy to bring those forward. North Shore Water Commission is actually a much smaller portion of the purchase water that we otherwise use, so it is not intended to have a large mathematical impact on the budget, but we would, pending the adoption of this policy, when they next raise rates, then come through with that purchase water adjustment, just like we already do for Milwaukee Waterworks.
Okay.
And may I add?
Yes.
You can only do it within 90 days
Yes.
of when they adopt it. So you couldn't retroactively say,
Sure.
oh, now we know we could have, can we do it for the last 2 times that they did it? Unfortunately, you can't do that. The PSC does have a 90-day rule from rate implementation that would exist for North Shore Water, just like it does for Milwaukee Water. So.
And while we could do the calculation again, because it's a smaller portion of our purchased water, I don't think it's put us at a large, fiscal concern for not having previously captured those rate adjustments. Assuming that it's adopted, we would just ensure that we always do so moving forward. But of course, you ultimately have the authority to say no. So while the policy says we would always do it, it takes the action by the Water Utility Commission to formally approve that. So you could always be considering those on a case-by-case basis.
And then just a general comment to finish up. I like the thinking in theory about not shocking the system with a large increase, and therefore, looking at potentially making some minor adjustments along the way. I don't know what that number is, but if that was the thought of my colleagues, I'd certainly be in favor of having further discussions around that. I don't know what the action item would be around that in terms of, would you just add something in the policy, and then we have discussions around that, or what would be the next steps on that?
Yes, so since this in its entirety is a new policy, hence no track
Sure.
changes, we haven't had this in the past. It would be my intent between Ehlers and the finance department to discuss what our comfort level would be in recommending that threshold and then including that language in the version that you'll see in August for your discussion and reaction. But unless at this point anyone indicates opposition, I would just default to including that. Again, it's a policy, not a PSC regulation, so you can always decide in the future that the trigger should be something different than that. I just think it gives everyone, staff and for our budget reporting that kind of, it's not really a goal, but that threshold
Keeps
under
it on our
which,
radar.
yes,
Yeah.
we would be considering.
Great, thanks for the added commentary, appreciate it.
Keeps you from becoming Germantown with massive rate
Yes.
hike.
Otherwise, you'll see these in August for final discussion and consideration.
And that would be at the sewer and the water utility
Correct.
district commission meetings?
Yes. And obviously sewer goes out to council, but yes.
Yep.
Okay. We on to fund balance discussion.
Yep. It's about 2 or 3 more slides. So, let me just blow this up. Nope. Okay. So, I had it as homework that I wrote down in from our June 4th meeting to bring back from that list of the rated peers, what their fund balance policy was, and as well as, right, what a higher rating could yield in terms of interest rates. So I've tried to provide that here tonight. So I'll just note, currently you are rated AA, which note for a Moody's rated entity would be what's called AA2 there. So when you see, you know, AA3, AA2, just note 3 is actually lower than 2 there. So your current fund balance policy is 10 to 12%. This is for general funds, so again, we're not talking the utilities anymore. And then here are the list of the other communities, their corresponding rating, and their actual fund balance policy. So you see a lot of these communities generally higher than where you're at currently. As I mentioned as well, right, there's outside of the creditworthiness agencies, there's, you know, Government Finance Officers Association and others that would, you know, have their own recommendations that, you know, generally fall within, I would say, a range of 15 to 25%, depending on which organization you look at. I don't think it's, you know, hard and fast all the time that we do it only for one reason, but I do think it makes sense to pay attention to the advantages it brings, as well as, you know, what can we do with the abundance, right, which you do already have in your policy, but what can we do with it when we are over, and maybe even having something of, you know, whether that's a range that slightly increases both from the bottom to the top, if that makes sense. So then the other factor that I was asked to bring forward is kind of, you know, what is the difference in interest rates? That's going to depend on the current interest rate environment. So now I will say, what we're seeing between, you know, AA and then the next tier, which would be, you know, like like AA plus or AAA, even beyond that, really it's about 10 basis points, which is 0.1%. So for that new public safety building, you know, as an example, over the life of that debt, that would be $500,000 of savings. And we just took two as close as we could, similar sales that we've recently done that had similar par amounts as best we could. One thing here is we do have some kind of unique things happening in the market where the back end is going up much higher than the front end. So a lot of this is going to also kind of be determined based off structure. So I did not change the structure or anything like that. I just kind of want to make that clear that I wasn't like manipulating what I showed from any previous presentation in terms of your proposed principal structure of that financing. All I did was just take it down by 10 basis points to make it simple. And that was about $500,000 in savings.
Go ahead.
So appreciate the follow-up on this. Two questions that I have for you. Is it right to reach a conclusion based upon this data that there is no advantage that we can see in trying to increase the balance policy significantly, meaning we're not falling behind our peers that have higher balances in terms of our credit rating?
What I would say there is it's the only thing holding you back from going up.
Okay, fair enough. And
Yep.
then you talk over what period of time is that savings again?
20 year.
20 years?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
It would be inclusive though of other, you know, any other financing
Understand.
as well there.
Alderman Meyer.
So to get to an AA plus or a triple A, what would be the percentage? I mean, since you know, we're lower than the rest, but we're still at the AA2, and some are even less than us at AA3 or higher.
Yeah.
Where would we have to be to?
Yeah, it's a good question. Is our advantage or
Yeah.
giant equalized value?
Correct, yes. And,
I
you know,
figured that was the equalizing factor, because
Yeah,
all things being equal, you know, that included, we'd probably be lower. We've got a giant
Mhm.
tax base to draw from, so.
I would say as well, obviously, you're aided currently by recent growth. So, right, you've had good, pretty significant developments happen. If that were to slow down, that's another thing that could, and again, I'm just trying to provide the holistic picture.
And we're
you know,
not pegged
there.
out on debt either.
Yeah, and just kind of, again, kind of urge reading through that rating report, which just kind of suggested, you know, fund balance is something that you're just lower on, but you do a great job hitting the policy, right? But all communities that have the policy should be hitting their policy, regardless of the number that they're holding it to. If you're not, right, that's more of a managerial problem there, so.
Mayor?
Oh, go ahead, no one's talking.
So,
Couldn't see you behind the
that's all
teacher's
right.
head.
Yeah, you were looking ahead too. I was in your peripheral vision. The objection, all the previous councils that I've been part of when this topic's come up, is that it just seems like a moving target. And you've quantified the moving target for us on this page, right? Everyone's got a higher fund balance. It's preventing us from moving up. But what's the amount we need to move up to ensure that, you know, that we can hit that higher rate and see the savings? The premise for keeping it low is that you're not overtaxing anybody, right? You're having the people pay for the city usage and the city policies and the roads at the time in which they're, you know, being used, right? They're paying the taxes at the time, and you're trying to be fiscally forward-thinking within reason, which is why you do have a fund balance, and you're not on just a cash basis. So what can we do to hone down that moving target and really kind of hone in on a percent? Because like, it becomes a, you know, opinion discussion every time we go, you know, I think, okay, so we're 10 to 12, and maybe we go to 15, you know, or maybe we go to 18. And it's just, we've changed it a couple times, you know, and it really hasn't affected our rating, you know, really all that much.
Sure.
Well, only if we change it, we've been 10 to 12 for quite a while. We haven't increased it, have we?
Within the last 6 or 7 years, we went from 8 to 10, up to 10 to 12.
So slow and gradual.
Slow
Well,
and gradual.
So we know we have a track record of being able to do that.
I thought we went backwards. I recall we went down.
I don't recall that, but it hasn't changed much. Yeah. I'm looking at this, it seems like you'd almost have to double it. You might not even be guaranteed to bump up to the next run.
To answer that, I would say it's an open conversation that we could have with S&P. I don't think they would, you know, guarantee that it moves you up, right? They're not going to commit to that with that conversation, but you know, we can just comment on the last credit rating report to say they had suggested language in there that said it's the only thing holding you back. The, you know, council would like, you know, any additional insight you could put on us that would improve our metrics and kind of start the conversation there. I've had positive feedback from both agencies when I bring that forward to them. So you know, to answer your question, I think that's there. In terms of,
I'd like to request that.
yeah.
Personally, I mean, we all need to have a consensus to get that, but I'd like to see that and hear what they have to say.
The other mention I'll make is, there is rating chasing that you see from, if you just kind of look at some of the size of communities and things like that, right, that they'll really increase their fund balance policy in order to get there. They don't have the other metrics that are getting you to AA, if that makes sense. I mean, you could see that in the last presentation, where I said, kind of, here's your really strong points, where I had all those metrics laid out. So that would be the other thing is, I don't know, kind of predicting what they'll say, but I don't think they're gonna say, oh, it's gotta be 50% or 35%. So I would just kind of go there, and then the other thought process as well is, do we also wanna be cognizant of, it's not overtaxing, in my opinion, it's the continued, like budgetary performance that the city has that gets you there. You're not gonna do the big jump in 1 year, I wouldn't recommend it, right? Cause then you do have to figure out a revenue source and, figure out how we're gonna budget lower and things like that. Like I'm not saying that automatically has to go up significantly, cause I don't think that's achievable under levy limits. It would be something that you're continuing your budgetary performance. Off the top of my head, I think it was in the range of 700,000, correct? That you were over, right? And that's what helps you build to the next policy, if you decide to move it up. So I would say,
question for you on that exactly. So we're gonna vote tonight to move that into a pool fund out of the general fund. We left that in general fund and we changed our policy. My understanding is that other cities have funds that are, they have their designated funds, but they still designate them in their general fund. And then they count as general fund balance, right? So how can we ethically have some of our fund balance move into our general fund to reflect the balance that mirrors closely to what other communities are doing? So our capital,
well, they include, not only your general fund, they include all your funds when they're evaluating your reserves.
Okay.
Your low policy is like holding down the overall reserves as well. So that I think kind of connecting those dots is helpful to think about too. And then the evaluation would be is how much maybe do we have to hold back? Is it on certain policy decisions to get up to that level, right? Are we holding some of it back and maybe only using the investment earnings on that project or something like that? And I'm just like grabbing the closest straw as an example. I mean, there's a multitude of things you can do financially.
So our fund balance, when you're referring to that, it's all of our operating funds regardless of what ledger they're falling under the accounting principles, correct?
In terms of what S&P's evaluating, yes, it's looking at all your governmental funds.
So all your cash sitting there versus all your cash expenditures, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, that's a change, because beforehand it wasn't that they were considering all those other funds.
Yeah, we heard differently.
Yeah, we heard differently beforehand.
Yeah, we can, I can kind of show you the report.
Yeah, just recently.
Yeah. So.
Can you validate that?
Yeah.
Because if we can consolidate funds into general fund and reflect better ethically.
I don't think he's saying that. I think they're,
He's saying different, but I've heard just the opposite.
well, I know we've
recently.
heard different in the past, but
So I'm just trying to understand what that is for sure, and
Sure.
who says that. And
Yep.
I don't know where to look for that research, so I need
Yeah,
to-
I can pull the credit report and kind of go through that.
Okay, great. And then what was the value add on the new public safety building to equate to the capital and savings?
Pretty sure that was near 50 million.
Okay. So 50 million with the difference in borrowing rate would save 500,000.
Yep.
May I just continue on this?
yeah, go ahead,
Okay,
yeah.
because it would answer my question. Those words. Good topics, Rob and Brian. You've done a nice job on this PowerPoint, because we've been asking this question for years, and I think this us really close to an answer, and we appreciate the analysis. Really, your comment about rate chasing is, that's pretty much all the question is in my mind, is it, given that we are, well, two things. First of all, there's also the road borrowing program, and possibly some other projects that have yet to be discussed that will be requesting borrowing on in a few years. So let's say we would play the rate chasing game, and the borrow, if I'm not mistaken, is in 2 to 3 years. And so to try to get that rating increase by then, the fund balance would need to go up. It's based on like a 20 million operating budget, right? So for each 1%, we need another $2 million cash, I would think, in reserves.
Under that math, yep.
So to get 10% up, we'd have to somehow get up to like $20 million. No, am I 6? What am I? We would need a 10% increase,
No, 'cause that-
almost in cash
That's about,
reserves.
the 10 to 12 is about 2 million-ish.
Yeah. 2 total?
Yeah,
No. Well, that's it. So am I miscalculating? Because it's kind of the core basis of my question here. Because what would be the impact if we were to try to just, because 2 million is actually interesting to me, because maybe we just shift our policy temporarily till we get the borrow in 2 years, and we can go back, kind of backtrack after that. And I remember you saying, don't do that all the time, but again, this is a just bear with me, this is a generational project, you know, and we're gonna be we're gonna be saying to the taxpayers, we're spending 50 million plus at that time. So anyways, if we had to somehow increase the reserves by 20 million or what have you, it's a non-starter. If we only had to increase it by 2 million in a couple of years, and we could get that savings and then kind of slide backwards after it, I do find that interesting, actually. So I guess maybe more information would be nice. If rate chasing is even feasible, but I assume it's not.
Yeah, not,
well,
But
come
if it
back
is,
with
that's
what,
interesting.
you know, if S&P gives us any indicators or headlights into, you know, what a target may be, which they're probably not gonna be very explicit in that, but they'll
Well,
be
In fact, moving the 2
implicit,
million
yeah.
over that they were just talking about from the water and sewer, or kind of reclassifying it, if that does it, then great. So,
well, another way to think about the 500,000 over 20 years is it's 25 grand a year, about half a
Right.
penny on the tax roll.
yeah. So it's probably not worth, I guess that was my final point, is that you, in my mind, answered the question that it probably isn't worth ever increasing reserves unless there was some generational project where we saw significant savings and we could rate chase, but I don't see that, and I'm really happy with our reserve policy otherwise. Thank you.
Well, we're still gonna go ask the rating agencies how much would be enough to get us to the next level, and they could have a little bit more analysis. And then some more clarification of the rating report in general, just so we understand it. Is that what I summarize
Yeah, just
things enough?
Happy to provide that information.
Thank you.
do we have a threshold where we actually go down? So we're talking about a reward, but let's, you know, if we're asking,
Well, the stick might, you know.
yeah, if there's any
that'd be
risk,
useful to know about.
because like, we're under the assumption that if we go to borrow now, we'll be fine and we'll get the same rating, right?
Yep.
And we'll be able to borrow at the same rating. I don't wanna be naive in that assumption, you know, even though the 12-year track history of me sitting in this chair has been accurate to that. But, you know, $50 million of borrowing, it's the most I've borrowed on council. You know,
Yeah,
I wanna
it's
be
$2.4
accurate in
million
my assumption on that one.
So how do we get to 2.4 million, and, you know, is it even possible to increase by that amount by the time we do the borrow? That sounds like a lot of money.
Yeah, and I think we can come back with that if we have kind of an implicit target to, you know, from S&P in a little bit more direction. I'd rather not just shoot in the dark with that conversation. To your point on the downgrade, I would say that if you read through the report, their kind of downgrade scenarios were, poor budgetary performance, right? So if you flip the script, instead of what you have been continually doing, which is outperforming budget, you start underperforming budget, which I would presume doesn't happen given the strong budgetary practices that the city has, but that's kind of more under your control. And then the other one would be, right, I did mention what's helping as well is your significant growth that not all of the communities are also realizing that are on this list. And that can go away due to macroeconomic or microeconomic, items, right? It's hard to control continuous growth. Not to say that it is automatically gonna go down, I'm just saying, right, those are some factors that are somewhat out of your control, where the budgetary performance should be in your control.
And the pool fund that is being counted, right? What we have in the pool fund, we're moving from one account to the next. We wouldn't already be $1 million closer to that 2.4.
It would until you use it,
We're not using it for 2 years. Or are we?
Well, we're gonna start the
Some of
design
it.
contract pretty
Right.
soon, so.
You're using
We're already
some of
using
it for the
Yeah, we're already
design.
using it.
So Mayor, we're at the 7:26 mark here.
We are. I was just gonna
Um,
ask.
Do we
Status
wanna,
check.
do we wanna stay on schedule and start the regular council meeting at 7:30? And pick up impact fees as we move into the latter final stages of putting together the financial management plan? Or
We
do we
could do
wanna
that.
continue on that conversation tonight?
How long does it take?
Well,
I just have the preliminary results of what the impact fee would be, and then the continued comparisons, so it is,
We try and hit it quick,
yep.
and then that'll get us through up to other matters.
Yep.
And then
great.
Uh,
other matters can wait.
Sure. So just kind of real quick, did the preliminary highlighted police and fire impact fee calculation. This is solved for from FGM, I think. Yeah, their report that it was $71 million combined public safety building project. Obviously, you would reduce if that number goes down, right? So understand this is kind of the key concept here. So you guys haven't decided on what that building looks like or, scoped it out or anything. So I'm just saying, like, note this has room to change, but this would be essentially kind of modeling it after what some of the other communities did, which I, showed previously. I can't remember. Yeah, I didn't repeat that slide. But showing what some of the other communities did in terms of like people per unit calculation, and then what that ultimately gets to. So there is like 12 tables that gets to this. I'm just giving you the result. So about $2,000 for the multifamily per unit there, and then a single family would be $2,700 on, and then remember these are like your current park impact fee. They're done at the time that the building permit is pulled, if you kind of remember how that works. And then there's a police and a fire one. Again, the dispersion there was just based off of the square footage provided by the architect in terms of how that building would be split out. And then, for example, if we did 50 homes for 3 years leading up to that project, so 150 single-family homes built, collecting both fees, that's $850,000, $15,000 that you would be collecting, and you would reduce the par amount of your borrowing by that, which would reduce about $700,000 on top of that in interest savings. If that all makes sense.
Does it go to the city or would it go to SOFD?
The city. It's a city fee.
So it comes to the city bank account and then we,
I would say though, right, if you're still charge, right, for the capital needs of SOFD. So it's a charge of the city for your, you know, expenses to them, if that makes sense. They're not gonna be the borrower, they can't issue debt, you're the borrower. So, that's, yeah. So that's kind of where that would go, in terms of the impact fee there. Or if you guys want it to be held within there, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, you can choose who's holding it, but.
Well, we can't compel Thiensville to do this as well, so.
Right.
I like the idea of coming to the city and then we
Right.
make sure we end up taking care of our SOFD.
Yep. So, some things of note,
We're
just,
not building many new homes anyway.
No, they're not.
right,
Got 'em landlocked.
you know, just again, those surrounding communities, right, you can see they are somewhat reduced, but they don't have, you know, the $71 million project. So Jackson's building's already built, right, that municipal complex. Cedarburg's, I would have to remember where they were at from FGM's presentation. And Germantown, I think he said, was contemplating one, if I'm not mistaken. So theirs are probably actually increasing once they decide on what they're doing.
And you can only collect these until the point where you start the project, or,
No, you can use it on the debt service as
okay,
you
so
go.
you can keep going
Yep,
in the future?
you just have to use it within 8 years of collection, essentially. So you can't like sit on it for too long.
Sure.
Yep.
But there's, you borrow the money, you're paying
Yep.
on it right away, so.
Yep.
You just have to be careful about phasing it out towards the end then.
Correct.
Okay. So it could be more than 150 homes over the 20-year life.
Yeah, I was just kind of getting to
Yeah.
the borrowing amount. Yeah, sorry, but you're 100% correct.
Just wanted to make sure I understood the slide.
Yep.
I would just say,
Go ahead, Tim.
sorry, I would just say compared to the other alternative revenue taxes we discussed, I'm just so in favor of this. I think it's fair to help us support our SOFD, so I think this, I'm highly in favor of this, impact fee and moving it forward, however that can happen. I wish I could apply to commercial development as well, but it cannot, correct?
No, it can. I just didn't show that. I was just trying to make this as simple and quick as possible.
So it's another significant dollar amount that
Yep.
probably almost double, I would think.
The commercial growth rate was just less, but that's generally like a by square foot fee, right? The per unit there is by square foot, to kind of make that in line with industrial development as well, which there was no industrial growth, you know, projected, but just that's how that was calculated. But you have to charge it equitably, so you can't just like only charge residential. So apologize, I could have probably thrown that underneath here as well, but there would be a commercial charge.
Just as an example, Germantown's is like, I think it's like 63 cents per 1,000 square feet
Yeah.
of building area for, fire, and police, I think is like 25 or 30 cents per 1,000 square foot, so it would be probably similar.
Yep.
Type of an arrangement. Dollars per some square footage.
All right, any other questions on this?
So Mayor, I guess, just to kind of wrap this portion of the discussion up, you know, is there a willingness on the part of the committee as a whole to see staff move forward with Ellers on further analysis and fine tuning the numbers for a more formal consideration of such?
I think I heard that, but let's do a straw poll. Everyone who's in favor of having more come back for more detailed discussions.
Spending staff time on police and fire impact fees. Okay. We will take that direction. Thank you.
Are we to the end?
Yep, the
All right.
hands mean we're done.
Is there a motion to adjourn and move on to the common council meeting?
So moved. Second?
Motion a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned and we'll scurry up front here. And maybe give people a couple minutes if they need to use the facilities. Been here for a little while.
Collect my gear. Right?
He's got one.
That's so. And you don't have to do such your board.
Yeah, I know, I wasn't trying to trip.
And I know those
Spot.
There, are we leaving all this stuff?
Yes. I guess so, yeah.
Okay.
Just yeah. Gosh.
We got an appropriate buffer between us.
Good enough. Yeah, we, heavy agenda.
Yeah, yeah. This is a real killer.
Thank you.
I know, exactly. Well, Walker's not here, so.
34 yards of mulch.
I hear you. I'm good, my mail, but I really need it.
Give up on your mulch a little bit.
Oh, there you go.
Fantastic. How about you?
Yes, we got glass. If it wasn't for the, my son, would look up. Yeah, we had I ended up eating candy. Like I got a client that was Kelly. He enjoyed it. All of that. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think you're right. So we've got names Boyd.
Boy?
Yeah.
I thought it maybe just pick up the one that's out of what county.
Yeah. I put, he has nuts for eyes. But I put it in, guys think it's cool, the ladies think the moose is cool.
Oh boy. There we go. Trying to think who we'd have a water pilot with. Schools? They just pay, don't they?
They're a ratepayer.
Yeah. Trying to think who would have a water pilot.
No, we'd have a pilot utility-wide.
Oh, okay.
So the utility would pay us
Hmm.
an amount of money in lieu of a utility tax. You know how when you pay your re-energies bill, there's a utility tax on that?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the city of Port Washington has their own electric utility.
Yeah.
And just like you pay a utility tax to re-energies,
Okay. I think I get it.
same thing with, like cable, you know what I'm talking about?
We are missing one. Okay. He'll be back in a second. All right. Make sure everyone can hear me here. Everyone who's coming back is back. So we'll call the Common Council meeting for Tuesday, July 14th to order. Please call the roll.
Alderman Strelchuk?
Here.
Alderman Teleko? Alderman Meyer? Alderman Hancher? Alderman Bach is absent. Alderman Parrish?
Here.
Alderman Bratt?
Here.
Alderman Gebhardt?
Here.
And Mayor Nurbin.
Here, and I went out of order again, so we'll make up item 2 and do the Pledge of Allegiance quickly. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have no public hearings this evening, so we'll move on to personal appearances and public comment. Citizens wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda. If you desire to be heard on agenda items, you may be heard when that item is considered on the agenda. Please speak into the microphone at the podium. Time limit is 5 minutes. Is there anyone here this evening who wishes to speak on any item not on the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to public officials' reports. I have nothing this evening. How about you, Administrator Jones?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick comments. Recently, Captain John Hale, who served the City of Mequon Police Department for 30 years, retired from the city. I think his last day was Wednesday, July 1st. And yesterday, we swore in Lindsay Graceric as the new police department captain. She becomes the second female within Ozaukee County's history to assume a command level position alongside of current Ozaukee County Sheriff Christy Knowles. So congratulations to Captain Graceric. Also, coming up next month, the August 11th partisan primary election will be held across the state of Wisconsin. Early voting will commence on Tuesday, July 28th and run through Friday, August 7th. Hours will be 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. here at City Hall daily. Because the August 11th primary partisan election falls on a Tuesday, we, as a Common Council, will be scheduling and convening our regular monthly meeting next Wednesday, August 12th, because we'll have voting going on in this building and across the city all day until 7 p.m. on Tuesday, August 11th. So just a reminder to everyone here on the council, our meeting next month is Wednesday, August 12th. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have 5 sets of various board or commission meeting minutes and 1 resolution on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Approval. Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. We have 1 ordinance first reading this evening. So it's a first reading, but we won't take action on it, but it'll be on the agenda next month for formal consideration. That's ordinance 2026-1694, an ordinance amending City of Mequon zoning map from B5, R1, R2B, C2, and OA to R4, PUD, and C2, and land use plan from industrial residential 5-acre, residential 1 to 1.5 acre, and critical environmental to residential 1 acre and critical environmental for a residential core neighborhood consisting of 87 single-family lots on 107 acres for the property located south of 10303 Bear Road and north and west of 10007 Bear Road. Recommended by Planning Commission on June 22nd and is a first reading. We have 1 regularly scheduled ordinance on for this evening, ordinance 2026-1693, an ordinance creating section 46-4 of the Mequon Municipal Code related to the regulation of camping within the city. Recommended by Public Safety Committee on May 12th and first reading at the Common Council on June 9th. Is there a motion or any discussion from staff?
Move to approve.
A motion to approve.
Second.
There's a second. Any comments, questions? Everyone understands it perfectly well? Going once, twice? Okay, all those in favor, let's call the roll on this one.
Alderman Strelchuk?
Aye.
Alderman Teleko? Alderman Meyer.
Aye.
Alderman Hancher.
Aye.
Alderman Parrish.
Aye.
Alderman Bratt.
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt.
Aye.
Okay, on to resolutions, the first of which is Resolution 4299, a resolution authorizing the payment of interest on prior interfund advances in the estimated amount of $351,014 and the transfer of $700,000 from the city's general fund to the capital fund. This was recommended earlier this evening by Finance and Personnel.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Talaco. Alderman Meyer.
Aye.
Alderman Hancher.
Aye.
Alderman Parrish.
Aye.
Alderman Bratt.
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt.
Aye.
Alderman Strelchak.
Aye.
That resolution carries. Our last resolution this evening is Resolution 4300, a resolution adopting proposed amendments to the city's financial policy statement number 9 for debt management and city financial policy statement 10 for accounting, auditing, and financial reporting. This was also recommended earlier this evening by Finance and Personnel.
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That resolution carries as well. We have no unspecified or specified unfinished business from prior meetings. We have some new business. There's a mayoral appointment for the Festivals Committee, Denise Long and Elizabeth Stern for Parks and Open Space Board. Is there a motion on those two appointments?
Second.
Motion and a second. I know the Festivals Committee is glad to have an additional set of hands on deck. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those appointments are approved, and we are to everyone's favorite part of the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and nice to have a short meeting on your birthday.